Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome to Scarymania. All throughout the month of October, I'm going to be covering the history of horror movies. I'm going to be reviewing 31 horror movies in 31 days. No pressure. In all seriousness though, horror movies are something that I have come to love and appreciate over the past couple of years. And I've wanted to do a long-running series where I do daily uploads for a very long time. I love Halloween movies, so this was a match made in heaven. But before I go any further, I should say that when I was planning this series out, I had no idea I was going to mirror another popular series, specifically Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. In that series, James Rolfe, who's better known as the Angry Video Game Nerd, reviews 31 horror movies in all 31 days of October. When I was going about doing this series, I had no idea I was kind of copying the Monster Madness formula until I was done planning it out. So I just want to say that I'm not trying to rip anyone off or step on anyone's toes. If anything, this series to me is kind of a personal challenge. To review 31 movies in 31 days is kind of difficult, so I want to test myself and test my channel. But on another note, I want to talk to all of you about the history of horror movies, because more than likely there are some of you who only know horror movies from, recent times, which is fine. So I want to take this time to talk with you all about some older horror movies, from the 1920s through the 30s and 40s with the classic monster movies, to the 50s with the sci-fi horror movies, to the 60s with the rise of zombie movies, to the 70s with exploitation slasher movies, to the 80s where everything just blew up and created its own subgenres like action horror and horror comedy, to the 90s which were more self-aware, and into the 2000s and of course modern times. So with all the grandstanding and hot dogging out of the way, say your prayers and take your vitamins because Scarymania is going to be run wild all month long. Let's kick this series off by talking about what is considered as the original horror movie, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's rather difficult to pin down what exactly the first horror movie was to ever be released in theaters. The first monster movie was an adaptation of Frankenstein produced by Thomas Edison. Yes, that Thomas Edison. But film critic and greatest of all time, Roger Ebert, pinned The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari as the first true horror film. And not only that, but film reviewer Danny Perry called it cinema's first cult film, and a precursor to what we call today art house films. And since this film is celebrating its 100-year anniversary this year, I figured it's as good a time as any to talk about it. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari tells the story of a mysterious hypnotist named Dr. Caligari, a traveling magician who controls the mind of a monstrous brute named Caesar. And Caligari uses Caesar to commit various murders throughout the German countryside. I've seen this movie now several times, and I can confidently say that this is the horror movie Rosetta Stone. Most of the tricks and tropes of most horror films that we see, even in this year, 2020, can trace their roots back to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It can even be argued that the monster Caesar is the very, very, very distant relative of Michael Myers. The monster is played by Conrad Veidt, who after this would star in a movie called The Man Who Laughs, which was one of the primary influences for DC Comics' The Joker, and one of his final film roles was playing the head Nazi in 1942's Casablanca. But the real highlight of the movie, and what makes it hold up to this day, is the Expressionist style. Every shot in this movie is filled to the brim with genuinely troubling atmosphere. Every set consists of sharp edges, curved streets, and just genuinely unsettling landscapes. Roger Ebert, again, the greatest of all time, described it as a jagged landscape of sharp angles and tilted walls and windows, staircases climbing crazy diagonals, trees with spiky leaves, and grass that looked like knives. And when I say this movie invented all of the horror tropes, I mean most if not all of them, even down to the twist ending, which I dare not spoil. But at the end of the day, this movie is all about the line between sanity and insanity. There's a quote about this film from a German film professor. It goes something like this: "The style of German Expressionism allowed the filmmakers to experiment with filmic technology and special effects, and to explore the twisted realm of repressed desires, unconscious fears, and deranged fixations." Yeah, well said.